Hey guys, welcome to Market Like a Mother, Radiant Marketing's new podcast with me, content strategist Lauren Kowalski, and Karen Cummings, our founder and CEO. And this season we're going to be debunking some myths in marketing. And this very first episode today is debunking the myth that marketing moves too fast. So really looking at the timeless pillars that cut through the noise, cut through the trends, cut through the new platforms, and have that clear framework that we keep coming back to time after time again in marketing. So let's get into it. Hey Karen, how are you today?
Good, Lauren. How are you? I'm so excited that we're finally doing
I
this.
know, episode one. It's been a long time coming, but I'm super excited, and I feel like we're starting off with such a good topic. So we're talking about the myth that marketing moves too fast, and I feel like that's something you and I have spent a lot of time talking about, since we've both been at Radiant together.
Yeah, I think we fall victim to this idea, like our clients do. And I think it feeds into this whole like anxious world we live in right now, too. So I'm excited to dive into this.
Absolutely. As we were deciding on this topic, I was thinking, obviously, I'm Radiant's content strategist, so I handle the content, and I was thinking about how many times I feel like the clients have had this panicked feeling of, arriving too late to the game, or, being worried that they're not able to chase every trend. So I'm like, I feel like we have some really good, like, real life agency stories to bring in here. And I know you've seen this too, probably firsthand over building your agency and kind of keeping up with all these trends.
Yeah, and I think that like the first most important distinction we should make is like marketing does move fast, but do we have to keep up with all of it? Because I
Right.
think that's where the FOMO comes in, the stress comes in, and that's definitely something that's preventable and not always things we need to chase.
Absolutely. I know. I feel like every time we hear there's like a new platform coming out, that's the number one thing is like, oh my gosh, another one. Like, how are we going to add this to our clients' repertoire? But as we'll kind of dive into today, I think there's those key pillars that kind of remain over time that could help you kind of cut through all that noise of all the trends and all the buzz and new platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super excited to touch on those because I think too you'll see how they tie two trends in certain ways, but they come back to these key foundational elements that if we're aligning and focused on those, then we can better discern how we decide what we're going to get involved with.
Absolutely. So as the founder CEO of Radiant, how do you kind of feel these pain points show with the clients and that feeling that the marketing is moving too fast for them?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see in initial conversations too with prospects that they're like, hey, we're seeing companies do this, or I'm as a consumer, on these platforms, I need to be here too as my brand, my business. And in some cases, it's true. You want to be, tuned into what's happening, but it doesn't necessarily mean you need to be immediately active and either spreading your resources across another channel or reallocating, resources from a channel that's already working. So I think, the urge to not miss the boat, to stay on top of all the trends, oftentimes outweighs the pause and kind of the strategic thinking around whether or not that trend or that platform is going to resonate with your audience. It's where your audience is, like all those important questions that we want to ask because we just get so caught up in how fast things are moving or how fast we feel like things are moving.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like in addition to like that urgency and that kind of feeling behind, you also then really risk burnout and spreading yourself too thin, like you said, and then you have content overwhelm with trying to produce for all these different channels, and it truly could lead to your team being burnt out super fast if that's kind of your main focus, I feel.
Yeah, and also just the results too, right? So if you're trying to do 40 different things at the same time and you're working with a small business budget, then the outcome of that is not going to necessarily be what you want it to be. If, as compared to having your three kind of core channels or content, strategies or whatever that looks like, that's really focused and really strategic and data backed and analyze and optimize, like that's what's going to really move the needle. So I think yes, burnout for sure, and then results is kind of the second big thing that becomes at risk when you try to chase trends.
Absolutely, I know. And when I'm thinking about trends too, I'm trying to think of like trends that we've seen companies or our clients chasing that weren't worth it. And there's so many that come to mind, at least for me. I know you and I have talked about before, like we saw Vine, which was this like bright, shiny star that kind of had its moment. It was there. Everyone wanted to be on it. And then just like that, it was gone, and truly gone, like not even on the internet anymore.
Yeah.
So it's, that's obviously a whole thing to think about too, is, chasing these trends that can be gone in a blink of an eye.
Yeah, yeah, and that goes back to the idea that you want to make sure you're investing your resources in your own owned channels as well.
Right.
So a lot of these third party platforms should be added into your strategy as kind of ancillary tactics, because you don't want to be too dependent on things you don't have control over. An algorithm update's going to just completely wipe out your visibility, for example, or if government policies are going to take away your platform. Like, so you want to be careful that you have a lot of your resources invested in things that you actually have control over too.
Absolutely. And how do you feel that this kind of shows up in client conversations for you? So, I know maybe clients might be pushing to be on a certain platform and putting their resources there, but I know, at least from my experience, it's like they don't always know the why behind it. So kind of how do you navigate those conversations as the, founder and CEO of Radiant?
Yeah, I think what you just said is so critical, like the why behind it. So first is evaluating like what is the reason we want to get involved in this? What is the goal with exploring this platform? We certainly can evaluate different opportunities and see like, is there a chance that your audience is on this platform, that the content we would be producing for this channel aligns with what you're able to produce with the resources you have, but then also looking at some of the details in terms of demographic and reach and potential competition, kind of doing that analysis to further reinforce whether or not this is somewhere you want to be. And then kind of coming back and deciding like, okay, so here's the goal, here's what we're seeing with this platform channel, or even just a trend, right? Like, so some of the things that are happening from a smaller perspective on a specific platform, like there might be some things that you want to hop on that are fun. And maybe you do it because it's fun. So if your goal is like, I want to do something fun, I want to be trendy, I want to like be in this conversation, like that's one thing. But if you're like, I want to do this, I'm going to invest a ton of resources because I want it to generate this much in revenue, then we help our clients like evaluate those opportunities and determine like, based on your goals, do we feel confident that you would likely be able to achieve that? And then of course you do have to test, so sometimes it's like, yeah, let's test it and see, and then we'll iterate, optimize, and or decide like this just what isn't where you should be right now to achieve that specific goal.
Right, absolutely. And I feel like a main theme I kind of was taking away from everything you were explaining there is that those fundamentals and kind of those core truths in marketing stay the same. So even when we're evaluating the why and kind of the reasons behind being on this platform, it feels like the results, always come back to the kind of the main point of our myth here today is that marketing does move fast. Like you said, there's these platforms, there's these different outlets and different channels, but that the core, fundamentals of marketing really don't change over time. You look back at like print TV media, which is now kind of transformed into more of an online digital landscape. And those patterns still kind of remain the same, which I know we're going to get into today and kind of talking about those pillars, despite trends fading, that there's always those timeless kind of core themes throughout it.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think like you and I were just talking about, and you just sent out a newsletter to our community as well about vibe marketing. So I know we're going to talk about the framework and some of these pillars, but I think too it's important to kind of tune into the terminology being used, because I think it gets us excited, like, oh, there's something new, and in some ways there's newness to it, but a lot of it still does come back to those pillars that you mentioned. So I'm excited to share those today because I think those are the things that we really want our audience to be tuned into to help them kind of discern which new tactics, trends, channels, strategies they should be considering.
Absolutely. And to give our listeners a little like peek behind the curtain too, we recently read at Radiant, we have a book club here, and we read This is Strategy, and we by Seth Godin, and we really, I felt like, took a lot away that's going to be kind of main themes in this conversation. So I had a little quote written down here from him that I wanted to share, but he said, strategy isn't about reacting to every new thing, it's about making clear choices. And I feel like that's kind of like a guiding principle in our whole conversation today is, there's going to be lots of new things to pick from and things that you could react to, but it's about making those clear, intentional choices with this framework and these pillars that we're going to talk about today. So I felt like keeping that in the back of your head is a good little tidbit for today.
Absolutely, and I feel like it's the things like Marie Forleo says. It's give them what they want, show them what they need. And I think over the 10 years in business, I've consistently realize that we're all wanting to like implement and do and like get stuff out there. And our secondary thought or if at all a thought, is like, what is the strategy behind this? Like, again, the why, the goal, like what is the big picture that we're trying to accomplish? What change are we trying to create? That's like the thinking work, like the sit down and like really work through it things that I think we want to skip ahead of.
Right.
But if we do, then we're really missing out on the real opportunity of what we have, the impact we can make and the change we can create. So yeah, let's talk about the four pillars.
So again, kind of like we were saying, I feel like great marketing always comes back to these timeless pillars, no matter what the trend is, no matter what the platform. So we kind of like to think of it as a framework that we keep coming back to over time. And I know Karen and I both kind of identified these four main pillars that we're going to dive into. We have human emotion, audience empathy, clear value proposition, and then authenticity and trust. We really think like these are those guiding core themes that really don't change too much over time, despite they may look different from time to time. So I definitely want to jump right into human emotion and kind of get your thoughts on this guiding pillar to start us off, Karen.
Yeah, well, I think this is at the root of everything, right? So like, I think it sounds so silly, but it wasn't until recently I feel like businesses, like B2B businesses, started to recognize, like, even though we're B2B, we're still talking to individuals, right? So everybody is human. All these decision makers, whether they're on the consumer side or the business side, are individuals who have feelings that guide their decisions that they then rationalize to make a move. So I think that in the end, what we're creating to make people feel something. So we want to appeal to human emotion, whether we're on Instagram, email, in live events. Like, that is really what our marketing is should be designed to do.
Absolutely. And again, I think this kind of touches on that vibe marketing that we were talking about. So kind of putting the stats, putting the data slightly to the side for a little bit and really just coming back to, how does marketing make us feel? Because that's such a huge driver and such a big factor of, if people end up resonating with a brand or with a product, a lot of it comes back to how it feels when they're viewing that advertisement, how they feel, about that product. I know we talked a little bit about the Think Different campaign by Apple, that was more about like the aspirations and the identity and less of, actually promoting that product. And I feel like that's a kind of a prime example of like at the root, this was an older advertisement, but it really always comes back to making people feel something.
Yeah, and the same goes now for like present day, right? The viral videos that, like, on TikTok or Instagram, the things that people really latch onto are, I would venture to guess, like 100% of the time, because it made somebody feel something, right? So I think when you're evaluating, the trends that are moving quickly, the new channels that are coming up, is to go back and ask yourself, can I use this platform or this trend to make people feel the way I want them to feel? And so in some cases, that's why I think Twitter can be limiting for some, or Vine may not have been successful, is because you can't really elicit too strong of a feeling in a 6-second clip or 140 characters or whatever. So do those limitations prevent you from being able to create the emotional connection that you want to create? So use that as an evaluator as you look at the fast things coming through.
Absolutely. And I feel like too, I think about, how many ads we're exposed to now on a daily basis. We're scrolling and it's, almost everything we see is marketing. And when I really think back to ads that I truly remember, it's always the ones that made me feel something. So like I could maybe name 3 Super Bowl commercials from the past few years, but I so vividly remember the Run Like a Girl campaign from Nike because it made me like tear up as I was sitting, there watching it on my TV. And to this day, I remember that campaign. I could probably quote the whole commercial now, but so really, I think too, when you think back of ads that's resonated with you, it always, at least in my opinion, has that strong emotional tie that really helps you cut through that noise when we're kind of living in such an oversaturated marketing advertising world these days.
Yeah, and I think that ties too to the idea of storytelling, right? And if we can create a story, if we can elicit emotion, then neuroscience tells us that our brain is activating in more areas, and we are more likely to recall that conversation or that ad or that story. So these are all, proven ways to further reinforce your brand as well, and can be the most successful opportunities for us to activate brand advocates and get people talking about our business.
Absolutely. And I feel like that kind of leads us perfectly into our next pillar, which is audience empathy, because that kind of ties right into that emotional connection. So obviously using, those personalized email ads or targeting to show your audience that you directly understand the struggle of the problem that you're trying to help them solve, tying into that emotional feeling for them of like, wow, they get it. They understand me. Like that's a super validating feeling.
Absolutely. Right. So I think, they're so hand in hand that it's almost a little bit of a challenge to distinguish the two, but I think it is important to understand like, yeah, we can get people to feel things, but are we getting them to feel the things that tie to the specific need or want or desire that we're able to support them into? So that empathy, like you said, is so important to make sure that we're not just getting someone riled up or, getting someone sad and emotional. We're actually then providing that connection to and understanding with like what they're personally dealing with or aspiring to, and here's now something that could support you in that.
Right. And I feel like a lot of times people just want to be heard, in a way of, we understand the problem, we understand the struggle. And obviously we work with a lot of health and wellness brands at Radiant. And I feel like that's kind of at the core of what we do is, appealing to these audiences who might be dealing with a specific health condition or, might be at a stage in their workout journey where they're, experiencing a struggle they're trying to overcome. And I feel like, that's really at the core of what we do here is saying like, we hear you, we understand how you're feeling, and we're, providing a solution in a way that directly appeals to them. So I feel like empathy is a huge one, at least for us here at our agency, in the health and wellness space.
Yeah, and I love that you talked about that because I think one of the things that's important to like overlay with this is like those stages of awareness, right? Because as we go through our journey with a brand or in our own discovery or self-guided kind of journey of solving a specific problem, we're usually in different stages of knowledge and action. And so appealing to the emotion and the understanding the specific need in those different stages is really important too. Like you may not want to introduce your product early on when someone's just realizing that they have a problem. We want to make sure we're feeding up the content on the right channels at the right stage to move them through and create more of a real relationship.
Right, absolutely. And I feel like too, again, perfectly teeing us off into our next pillar here, but that clear value proposition. So kind of, just what you touched on is the final reveal almost of why they need the product or how we're going to help, provide a solution for them is such a, after we've made them experience that empathy, made them feel that emotional connection, really driving home, this is the value that we're providing you. We've made you feel something, we've made you understand, that we know what you're going through, and we're here to provide, this clear solution to you.
Absolutely. And I think this is like probably one of the harder ones for me as well. And I know that a lot of business owners struggle with getting really clear on the specific problem that they're trying to solve for. Especially, creatives and service-based businesses, there's a desire to solve a lot of problems, right? And your brand may solve multiple problems, but I think it's really important for us to surface to the top, like the main thing that we're really trying to address so that it's crystal clear for anyone that's following your content, that's in your community to understand, that one big thing that also sets you apart from other competitors in your space. So getting really clear on that can be super impactful in driving the action we want to see from our communities.
Absolutely. And I think too, you almost run a little bit of a risk here. You obviously want to establish a super clear call to action of, what exactly you want your audience, your viewers, your consumers to do. And when you've had that really strong emotional connection made and you've like we've said, we've made the audience, feel that we really understand them. I feel like having a good call to action that doesn't then kind of lose them feeling super salesy or, kind of having them evoke these feelings of emotion and then immediately hitting them with some type of call to action that feels, super just businessy, salesy, marketing, like corporate, driven, language. I feel like that's a really tough part too, because you could very easily also lose, your audience at this stage in it. And, this is where you want to drive home kind of the most and get that action from them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's probably part of the reason too that business owners could struggle with this area and is more of like that sales side of it, right? Because like sales can feel so slimy, it can feel so pushy. And I was just having a conversation yesterday with an individual about this too, where as soon as you shift your mindset around selling to a mindset of supporting and helping, I think it becomes so much easier to naturally and organically prompt them into finding the solution that's best for them. And I think it's this is such an important distinction too, because your solution will not be the best solution for every single person out there. So it's okay if your clear value proposition doesn't speak to everyone.
Right.
It The clearer you are though, and the more differentiated you are and the more specific you are on what you're looking to accomplish and the change you want to create for them, the more it will deeply resonate with the right audience. So definitely don't be afraid to you know get some people to say this isn't for me. I think, Seth Godin talks about that too, where it's like you're marketing, you want to market to the smallest viable audience, an audience that's large enough for you to be, successful, but not too large to where it doesn't really mean anything to anyone. You want to create a tribe, you want to create like these deep connections. And so having that clarity and getting, specific and making sure you're thinking of it in a way that's to help that individual versus to sell that individual. I think all of that is really helpful in like reinforcing these pillars and leads us to our fourth pillar perfectly.
And I feel like, so our fourth pillar is authenticity and trust. And I feel like this weaves throughout the whole thing. You can't have any of these pillars without leading with authenticity and trust. And I feel like that's, to me, this feels like almost one of the most important pillars, of this. And when we're thinking back to going back to our myth that marketing moves too fast, I feel like authenticity and trust has always, been one of those core founding pillars of marketing, whether it's 50 years ago, you're seeing an advertisement in a magazine, you're still kind of looking for those word of mouth marketing reviews, kind of real life customer intakes. And it's just, it's just basically in the form of digital. You're reading, the online reviews, you're still getting that word of mouth, that trust, authenticity. So this is one that I feel like will never go away in marketing. This is, a really, really important pillar to always be mindful of.
Well, absolutely. And like to your point right now too of like the transformation over time, I think this is becoming even more important because of AI and what software is able to do for us. And I think there's like certainly advantages to that, but you want to be really careful that you're not leaning too heavily into the AI side too. So if you're again thinking like, oh, I want to get, hop on this trend, or I want to get on this platform, I'm going to use AI to do all of it for me. That's a slippery slope, like, because that, right away you're losing a bit of your authenticity. Even if you're doing it in a smart and thoughtful, intentional way, you're still using AI to create the things for you, which can be dangerous. And I know, Lauren, we've talked about this too, like the backlash from AI generated videos or images, and like the general consumer already is getting really is really aware and tuned into what is AI generated or not, despite how real some of this stuff looks. So I think with AI, that authenticity piece becomes even more important. So it's, again, when you're evaluating what you can get involved in, it's like, can I do this, potentially with the support of AI, but not having to lean entirely on AI to launch this new initiative for me.
Absolutely. And I feel like we've seen, at least I've seen even firsthand, businesses who directly face, backlash of being inauthentic and kind of losing their customer trust because they were directly just using AI to chase a trend, whether it was a trending audio that they wanted to hop on and use, to create a video. So I feel like that's such a warning to people, out there that you can't chase these marketing trends and fully rely on that AI aspect, because it's like you're going to instantly lose, that authenticity and that trust with your audience. And I think going back to trust, especially too, like I said, we're in a very oversaturated consumer market right now where, if you want to buy a pencil, there's going to be, 50, types of pencils on Amazon that you could buy and a million sites that sell them. So those.
Do people still use pencils? No, I'm just
I haven't even used. Let's do something more realistic that I'm buying these days, like lip gloss. I'm like there online, and I am reading the reviews, and I'm, that to me feels more important than ever because we're in, a world where you could, buy millions of types of products online from millions of different sites. So I think too, again, if you don't have that direct, trust with your audience and kind of building that core fan base, and like you said, the smallest viable audience, that's going to, advocate for you, that's going to recommend you, that's going to, be a champion for you online. That's really, really crucial these days, when there are so many options out there for consumers.
Yeah. And again, not to keep talking about AI because we're not like experts in AI, but we have learned quite a bit about AI as we've journeyed through these last, what has it been, 16 months. But I do think that the ecoverse being such a large component of how LLMs are ranking and showing content for brands, and that is, a heavier weight, giving a heavier weight to that social evidence and proof, those reviews. It's leaning on, like you and I know, Reddit and Quora and Google reviews as a way to determine if they should be pulling that content to show it to other individuals. So that social proof is even more important, right now, and I can't imagine it getting less in the future. To make sure that a portion of your marketing resources is dedicated towards creating the opportunities for people to share their experience about your brand, whether that's through the platforms we just said or other more niche kind of platforms that are specific to your industry or software space.
Right, absolutely. And I feel like too, when you get your audience to trust you and feel that you're authentic, you almost create them into marketers for the brand themselves. Obviously UGC and user generated, like we said, reviews or even just content is so huge these days, and it's such critical social proof. So, being authentic and kind of leading and nurturing trust with your audience, it's going to almost do some of your marketing for you in a way, because then you're going to have these individuals who are, fans of your brand being almost marketers for the brand itself online, which is really, really important. When I think about all of these, I have to ask you a tough question. Like, which to you feels the hardest, in your day to day and in our work at Radiant? Is there one of these that you feel like you have to, take extra steps to really work towards?
I still would probably say, because I think being a passionate person and understanding the value and importance of human emotion, and being very empathetic myself, like those things I think come naturally to me, and it's easier for me to communicate that for our own brand and make sure we're prioritizing that for our client brands. But for me personally, I think in our agency, I really do feel that it's the focus on like the one specific challenge, because we do offer a number of services too, that can carry someone through and solve multiple challenges. So I think, solving for that or knowing that that's a challenge for me, I think is, it's really important in those initial conversations and the content and the way we're moving people through their journey with us as well, is to understand where they're at. Because yes, like we can solve for this challenge over here, but if I know that you're not yet ready for that, or first you need to do this, if you're not ready to generate leads because you don't have a good website, so your primary challenge is getting a solid brand site and up and running, then I want to make sure that I'm like hyper focused on where you are at right now and how we can support you. But yeah, what about you? What, from your perspective and as an influencer, which we haven't talked about on this episode, I'm sure we'll dive into that more. Like, what would you say of these three is the most challenging for you?
I always come back to the authenticity, whether it's in, my personal work outside of Radiant, doing influencing, or, for our clients, is I almost sometimes feel the need to over explain. So I'm passionate about the products and the work that our clients are doing. And I feel the need to almost like show every little behind the scenes detail. Like, no, this product is really good, and here's the marketing that we're doing for it, and like here's how we built this campaign. But there's such a fine line, I feel like, too, with sharing too much and keeping it professional and still keeping that like we're a brand, we're a product, we're a business, we're not, necessarily an influencer ourselves online. So that's kind of tough for me, because sometimes I feel like I feel the need to be incredibly transparent to achieve that authenticity, when I'm learning now with our clients that that's not always true. You could share enough to build that connection with your audience and kind of still maintain that professional brand consumer relationship. But it's hard, because I almost feel the need to just instantly put everything out there. And again, even in my personal life, I feel like if I'm keeping parts of it, it feels inauthentic to me, when it's, overcoming that barrier of maybe I feel that way because, we're on the inside and we know everything that we're doing behind the scenes. But, it's not,
Mm-hmm.
all of these things aren't necessarily required for the consumer to then, still feel connected and be informed and be along for the ride with us. So that's something I think I struggle with a little bit, is just the need to over explain everything that we're doing, to feel like I'm being authentic.
Yeah, I totally get that. And I mean, I love that you brought that up because I feel like that ties to, Brene Brown's vulnerability work. And I think there's this idea, it's finding a balance of being vulnerable and authentic and sharing, but not oversharing. Like everyone doesn't have to know everything about everything. But it's not withholding. It's more just, we also don't want to overwhelm, right? Like we don't want to overwhelm with information. But we want to show, the truth, and we want to get that information out there in a way that's consumable and real. Yeah. So I think finding a balance can be challenging sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like I want to leave our listeners with some questions that they could kind of think about throughout their day here too. So, really asking yourself, does my current marketing efforts align with my long-term goals? I feel like that's a big one to really take a look at. Think of it in terms of these pillars that we just talked about. Really think about, what am I doing right now that will affect me, 5-10 years down the road, as I'm envisioning what my business looks like in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely.
And then also, I would say, am I prioritizing trends or strategy? That's a big one, because you could do that in a way, like we said, that's still effective. That's still, when you really reflect on that why, whether it's for fun, whether it's serving a clear purpose. But again, am I prioritizing them over, those core pillars, those core, marketing themes? And then, will chasing every new trend, tool, platform get you closer to that goal that we talked about? So your long-term goals, going back to your thinking 5-10 years ahead, if you're chasing this trend right now this week and you need to get this video up, how is that prioritizing that over other things that you could be doing this week going to further your bottom line and get you to those long-term goals?
Yeah. And then I think you said at the beginning, but again, like tying all of this in with, is this going to support those timeless pillars? Is it going to help us appeal to the human emotion in the way we want it to? Is it going to show empathy for our listeners and our ideal audience? Is it going to help to differentiate us and make our value proposition really clear? And is it real? Does it feel like us? Is it where we want to be? I mean, that could be kind of like that gut check too for business owners. It's like, if you're like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to, whatever it is, like, then like skip it, I mean, I feel like, and if you've got good things in place that are working right now, like why take away from that? Most of the clients we're working with are in the small business sector. So they're not like endlessly resourced. They have limitations. And rather than like taking away from something that's working, that feels good, to just like chase a new trend or try something different for, without clear goal or purpose, and you don't feel joyful about it, then like let's table it, at least for now, and maybe like let's play it out and see how it goes over the next couple of weeks. Like we're not going to miss out, like especially if it's a new channel or platform, like if it's something up and coming, like you do kind of want to wait a little bit, right? Just
Right.
To see if it explodes or if it implodes, or so I think pausing for a minute is never a bad idea. But and like on that note, some takeaways too is just like not everything needs to be fast, trendy, or popular. I think being in the health, like especially the healthcare side of things, the healthcare software side of things, it doesn't have to be like the sexiest thing out there to be attractive to your ideal buyers. So you don't need to fancy things up to the point that you lose touch with like the purpose and goal. A pretty campaign will only take you so far if it's not focused on results still. So I think that's super important. And then also, like we've talked about throughout the whole conversation, is like, yes, be agile and adapt. Like things change. We're not by any means saying like be a Kodiak and stay stuck in time. Like you need to make sure you're like tuned into what's going on, align with an agency that can help support your education and like the different trends and such. But yes, it's okay to slow down and build with intention.
Absolutely. Do you mean partner with an agency like us? That's kind of what I was hearing.
Yeah, like Radiant or Radiant.
Radiant. Something that I loved, that as you and I were kind of talking about what we were going to discuss here today, is you kept saying it's okay to do it your way. And I feel like that's a huge kind of little takeaway, even just to think about, like you said, tabling something until it feels right, till it feels ready, kind of giving that gut check, that vibe check. So I think that's a big thing too, to just remember that it's okay to take the time and, make your own decision on these things. You don't need to follow every single trend just because you're seeing businesses around you do it.
Yeah, I mean I love this sentence of like it's okay to do it your way, first because it rhymes, but also because it should apply to like everything in your life, right? Especially entrepreneurs. I feel like we can get so caught up in what everyone else is doing and like doing things the right way when your right way might look so much different than anyone else in your circle, in your market, in anything. And so I think it's so important to trust your own instincts and to stay focused on the impact and that you're trying to create, the change you're trying to create, and understanding how that might be different than what someone else is doing. So absolutely, yeah, it's okay to do it your way.
I love that. I'm gonna keep that in my head all throughout the day today. And listen, we want to leave you guys too with some like practical kind of steps that you could do today. So kind of pulling back and thinking, is there an area that you could simplify, like we said, or even saying no to something that would help you hit your goals, and kind of maybe take a minute today to audit and take a look at your current marketing efforts against these pillars that we gave you, and seeing, are the things that I'm doing right now pushing me towards that bottom line, towards the long-term goals, while keeping these pillars, at the forefront of what I'm doing? Or again, are there things that you could pull back on and simplify even just this week? So I challenge you all to kind of take a look at that today.
Yeah, I mean that ties to the kind of timeless idea of like 80% of your impact comes from 20% of your effort. So where is where does your true impact lie in what you're doing? We were recently at the Global Leadership Summit, and this one of the keynotes was, revolved around this whole topic. She works with the military, and it was like, how can we remove things and still be effective? So yeah, what can I stop doing, right now, today, that I'm doing that's not driving any results, that's not, feeding my soul, that's not doing, the things we want it to do, and like nix that, like get rid of that. Or like, what are things we're doing as a company that aren't driving revenue, aren't driving impact in some way? It might not always be direct ROI. There might be things you're doing that are more, connected to your vision or your goals as a change maker in the space. But evaluating that, and then, stopping as much of it as you can that's not driving results.
Absolutely. I love that. And again, I love that. I feel like that these are things people could even take a look at this week or today, and really begin having those conversations internally, and taking a look at, your marketing efforts. And, that is, I think, our myth for today. So again, debunking there a little bit, that the myth that marketing moves too fast, there's always going to be those core pillars over time that never change. And I don't know about you, Karen, but I'm super excited to debunk some more myths coming up in the next few weeks here.
Yeah, me too. Also, I feel like we should leave some like secret little nugget of like a prize potential here. So anyone that stayed to listen to the end of our podcast episode, send us a DM and we'll send you a Starbucks gift card or something.
Yes, and then you'll have your caffeine and be fueled to go audit your marketing on us. So
Yes, I love it.
we'll be looking out for your DMs, and we will see you here as we are getting ready to debunk some more myths the rest of the season. And we're looking forward to chatting with you guys more.
Awesome. Thank you, Lauren. This was great.
You too. Bye, Karen.